You reach for a glass of wine after a long day. It feels modern. It feels like a small private luxury invented for stressed-out people in a stressed-out century. But the real answer is far stranger. Long before cities, before writing, before the wheel, a woman knelt beside a clay pot and watched something bubble on its own. She did not plan it. Nature did it for her. And what she tasted that day would shape human civilization for the next 10,000 years. Where do you think the first alcohol came from? Not a brewery, not a vineyard. It came from fruit left too long in the sun. Wild yeast lives everywhere, floating invisibly in the air, settling onto anything sweet. When overripe fruit falls to the ground and sits, that yeast gets to work, breaking down sugar into alcohol. This happens without any human help at all. Biologist Robert Dudley calls this the drunken monkey hypothesis. He argues that our primate ancestors evolved a taste for the smell of fermentation millions of years before humans existed, because that faint, boozy scent meant one thing: ripe, calorie-rich fruit nearby. Your ancestors didn't invent the taste for alcohol. They inherited it from creatures who climb trees looking for dinner. So by the time actual humans show up, the appetite is already wired in. What changes is the intention. Somewhere between 13,000 and 9,000 years ago, women stopped waiting for fruit to rot by accident. They started making it happen on purpose. Archaeologist Li Lu led excavations at Raqefet Cave in modern-day Israel, where stone mortars dating back roughly 13,000 years show residue consistent with brewing. Wheat and barley, soaked, mashed, and left to ferment into a thin, beer-like drink. This predates farming as we usually define it. Think about what that means. Humans may have started managing wild grain not primarily to make bread, but to make something to drink. Hunger didn't build the first granaries. Thirst did, and it was a very specific kind of thirst. And who was doing this labor? Across nearly every ancient society we have evidence for, brewing was women's work. Grinding grain for hours, chewing starches to help break them down with enzymes in saliva, a real technique used from ancient Peru to pre-colonial Africa. Managing fermentation temperature by feel, by smell, by years of inherited knowledge passed from mother to daughter. This wasn't a side task. It was a skilled, respected, essential craft, one of the earliest forms of biochemistry practiced by human hands, and those hands belonged to women. Why does that matter? Because it repositions something we tend to picture as a rowdy, masculine bar scene into its true origin, a domestic, feminine, deeply technical practice. At the Neolithic site of Jiahu in China, biomolecular archaeologist Patrick McGovern analyzed pottery residue dating back around 9,000 years. He found traces of a fermented drink made from rice, honey, and hawthorn fruit, one of the earliest chemically confirmed alcoholic beverages on Earth. McGovern has spent decades tracing what he calls the molecular archaeology of ancient drink, and his work keeps landing on the same pattern. Fermentation appears early. It appears often, and it appears wherever women were already managing food storage, because fermentation is, at its core, an extension of food preservation. Consider what your ancient counterpart actually knew. She understood, without any formal science, that certain jars needed to breathe, that certain grains, left wet in the right container, transformed instead of rotting, that the fizzy, sour, mildly intoxicating result was safer to drink than untreated water in a world without sanitation. This is easy to miss today, when you can turn a tap and trust what comes out. But contaminated water was a real and constant danger in the ancient world. A mildly alcoholic drink, brewed and slightly acidic, killed off many of the pathogens that plain water carried. In some regions, beer wasn't a treat. It was survival. Did that make ancient women the first pharmacists, in a sense? In many ways, yes. They were reading their environment, testing outcomes, refining a process through trial and generational memory, and distributing something that kept their communities alive and, often, together. Because alcohol did more than fill the body. It built the room around the body. Archaeologist Oliver Dietrich, working at Göbekli Tepe in modern Turkey, one of the oldest known monumental sites in the world, found large stone vats with residue suggesting large-scale beer production, dated to roughly 11,000 years ago. This site predates agriculture as we typically define it. Some researchers now argue that communal drinking and feasting may have been part of what drew scattered hunter-gatherer groups together to build something permanent in the first place. Not grain storage alone, not defense alone. Shared drink, and the shared labor of women who made it, may have helped hold early human society together long enough for it to become society at all. You can still feel a trace of that today, can't you? A dinner table with wine poured for everyone. A toast at a wedding. A drink shared after a hard week. Not because anyone needs the alcohol specifically, but because the ritual of sharing it means something older than any of us can name. There's a twist here worth sitting with. For most of history, brewing stayed a woman's domain, right up until it became profitable. In medieval Europe, alewives brewed and sold beer from their homes, a respected trade that gave many women financial independence in a world that offered them very little. Some historians have noted, with a kind of dark irony, that the pointed hats and cauldrons associated with brewing alewives later fed into the visual stereotype used to accuse women of witchcraft. As brewing scaled up, as it moved from home kitchens into commercial breweries, men increasingly took over the trade and pushed women out of an industry their ancestors had invented. The craft didn't change, the ownership did. So when you think about where alcohol came from, don't picture a tavern. Picture a woman with grain-stained hands, testing a jar by smell, adjusting a recipe she learned from her mother, feeding a fire, feeding a family, feeding, in a very real sense, the beginnings of settled human life. She wasn't chasing a buzz, she was solving problems. Unsafe water, food that spoiled too fast, a community that needed a reason to stay in one place long enough to build something lasting. What did she know that took modern science thousands of years to explain in a lab? That fermentation was chemistry before chemistry had a name. That certain molds and yeasts, when guided rather than left to chance, could turn scarcity into abundance. That a shared cup could do something a shared meal alone could not, soften the space between strangers, and turn a gathering into a community. You reach for that glass of wine tonight and it feels modern. It feels invented for you, for your stress, for your century. But it isn't. It's an inheritance. It runs back through medieval alewives, through the brewers of Göbekli Tepe, through the grain grinders of Jiahu, through a woman at Raqefet Cave who watched something bubble in a stone bowl and decided, quietly, to do it again. The glass in your hand is not modern at all. It is one of the oldest things you own.